In this lesson, I'd like to talk to you about certain things to keep in mind when connecting the rest of your rig to follow the captured data. So we now know the steps for connecting our rig to the animated skeleton, but there are some things still that we'll need to consider. For one, the character object, it's a very advanced rig, and as a result we have to be really careful when using it just to make sure everything works correctly. And here's what I mean. Let me go ahead and unlock the Attributes Manager and grab one of the controls. Alright, sweet. So with the chest control here selected, let's go ahead and focus on the character object's properties. Underneath Object Properties, here we have a few modes that we can switch between to adjust our rig and to skin our model as well. Now, it's super important that we make sure not to leave animate mode after we have set up our constraints, because if we do that, it might break the connection we have between our controls and the constraints. So if we wanted to adjust things further, again, that might interfere with the connection between the constraint and the control. So it's best to make sure your rig is exactly where you'd like it to be before you jump to animate mode and you either begin animating or begin setting up your constraints to retarget animation. So please do keep that in mind. Another thing to consider is, well, what needs to be locked down? Is it position and rotation, or just position, or just rotation? For example, when we get to, let's say, the character's elbows and knees, we just need to lock down position. Rotation is not needed then. Or when we get to the clavicles, well, it's just rotation and not position at that point. Same thing goes for the neck and head. So you get the idea. Let's say we go ahead and work on finishing out the right arm so you kind of get the process down. What I'll do is start with the elbow. Alright, sweet. So with that selected, let's go ahead and search for it. Sweet. So there's our pole vector control. Now, let's say we add our constraint tag. So that's tags, character tags, constraint. That'll be a PSR constraint. We'll use maintain original. And this time we're going to uncheck rotation. Sweet. So now, after locking down the Attributes Manager, we can go ahead and grab the elbow bone. Let's search for it. And then we can go ahead and assign it to the target field. Sweet. So if we were to start scrubbing through the animation, you'll notice that the elbow is now going to follow. It's kind of difficult to see without the rest of the arm. So let's say we go ahead and work on the arm control next, and then we'll finish with the clavicle. Alright, so we know the process already. Let me go ahead and unlock the Attributes Manager. With the arm control selected, we'll go ahead and search for it. Sweet, there it is. Let's say we add our constraint tag. It's going to be a PSR constraint. We'll turn on maintain original. Let's also lock down our Attributes Manager. Now, what will we need here? Well, that's going to be both position and rotation. Why is that? Well, remember, the arm is being driven by inverse kinematics. So we'll need to move this control around. It'll need to follow the position of the wrist connected to our animated skeleton. But it'll also need to rotate. That way we can move the wrist. So with that in mind, we'll make sure that this is both position and rotation we're using for this constraint. Alright, cool. So now we can go ahead and search for the wrist. Alright, with that selected, we'll go to View, scroll to First Active. If you're having trouble selecting it, by the way, you could always go ahead and grab the forearm bone and then move down in the hierarchy, and there is the wrist. It's named right hand. Alright, cool. So now we can go ahead and add this to our target field. Let's go ahead and have a look at the animation now. We should start seeing some progress. We most certainly are seeing the progress we'd like to see, even though the arm is kind of sinking into the body a bit, this is actually really simple to tweak. We talked about this already. Yes, we can create our offset control, but here's another way. Let's go ahead and jump to frame 0. And what I'll do is go ahead and keyframe position and rotation. Alright, sweet. So now we can go ahead and jump to frame 1. And then we can go ahead and add a twist here in our bank axis to adjust the wrist. How cool is that? If you need to, you can go ahead and adjust the other axes. For example, the pitch axis. We can go ahead and bring the wrist down with that. And then keyframe what we've changed. Great. Let's go ahead and scrub through. You can see how the arm kind of dips into the body. No worries. I'll just go ahead and use the position channels to add an offset. So I'll adjust in X, Y, and Z. All right. And then we'll have to tweak the elbow as well. Now I'm going to make sure I'm on frame 1 when I make those changes. You can see how the arm is locked, so this would be a great time to start making a few tweaks. So I'll just go ahead and adjust this in the position Z, the position Y, and X, just to loosen up the arm some. And then we'll go ahead and keyframe this. Great. And then we'll go ahead and tweak the elbow, and if we need to, we can create more keys along the way. So let's go ahead and search for the elbow control. A fast way to get to that is to jump to frame 0, select it, view, scroll to first active. Let's find its constraint. Remember, you can double click the constraint to load in its properties. So that'll create a separate attributes manager for you. And then you'll want to go ahead and lock that down. All right, sweet. So on frame 0, again, we're going to go ahead and keyframe our position channels. Let's then jump to frame 1. All right, let's have a look at the elbow so you can see it's kind of pointed into the body. No worries. We'll start to tweak the X, the Y, and Z axes until that's no longer the case. Fantastic. So from there, I'll make sure to keyframe this change on frame 1. And take a look at that. The arm looks much better now. How exciting. Now we have the clavicle left. Let's make sure not to forget about that. I'll go ahead and close out this Attributes Manager. And I might also unlock the Attributes Manager over to our right. With the clavicle selected, let's go ahead and search for it. There it is. Let's add our constraint. Sweet. It's going to be PSR. Let's go ahead and choose Maintain Original. What are we unchecking here? Well, that's going to be position, right? Because this should only rotate. Cool. Let's lock down the Attributes Manager. Let's now search for the clavicle bone. All right, so we'll go ahead and grab the object, view, scroll to first active. Let's add it to the target field. And let's have a look at the animation. All right, so you can see how the clavicle is starting to move, yes, but it has sunken into the body a bit much, right? But this is actually simple to fix. So we'll just go ahead and search for our rotate channels. And on frame 0, we'll go ahead and create keyframes. Now on frame 1, let's say we go ahead and adjust the bank. We'll go ahead and bring up the arm just a bit. And I'll go ahead and slide it over to the side in the heading axis to loosen it up. I'll make a slight change in the pitch axis just to, again, loosen it up a bit more. All right, sweet. So from there, once we like our changes, on frame 1, we'll go ahead and record a few keys. Much better. Awesome stuff. So again, make sure to take advantage of those offset values. And if you need to, go ahead and create your control. That might help you animate these areas a bit faster. All right, that's looking fantastic. Wonderful. So again, I just wanted to kind of walk you through the steps for connecting other areas of the body. Remember to make sure you stay in animate mode when you're using the character object. If it's a rig that you have designed, well, that's not a problem. You could always jump back to your neutral pose to create any modifications you'd like in your controls. But for the character object, it's super advanced. It's a great rig, but there are some things that we need to keep in mind just to make sure everything remains stable. Sweet. The last thing I'd like to talk to you about is the expression null set that we have at the very top of our objects manager. So these get created when we use the driven key system here in Cinema 4D. So if you'd like, you can always just go in and yes, rename them, but keep in mind that in the next lesson, when we learn how to disconnect our control rig, we won't have to worry about this any longer. The reason why is because when we disconnect, we're essentially going to bake down the entire animation back to our controls so animators can start to tweak the controls again directly. So once that happens, we no longer need any of these expressions. We could always go ahead and trash them to optimize the scene. But we'll talk about that more in the following lesson.